Okay, welcome everybody to tasting number, what is it? 185 of the Saratoga Whiskey Club. Actually, it was kind of funny. I was printing off this and creating this placemat, and I looked at when our last Lost Lantern tasting was and what number that was. It was like 150 something. So we've done quite a few tastings since you were here last, which is kind of crazy. But we're super excited to have Adam Polonsky back from Lost Lantern. Him and his wife Nora founded Lost Lantern a number of years ago. We've been big fans of what they're doing. He's going to explain about their process, how they go around about picking casks, blending casks, working with different distilleries all over the U.S. But super excited. They're very close, only an hour and a half away from us. There is a little ticket on your placemat there for a free flight if you get up there. They're in Vergennes, Vermont. But yeah, let's get started. Here's Adam. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming out on a beautiful hot night. Great whiskey drinking weather outside. Am I in a good spot for the camera? You can just shamelessly position me however you need. Just perfect. Yeah, so thank you guys so much for having me. Really great to be back. How many of you have either had Lost Lantern before or generally know what we're up to? I know some of you. Okay, so is that everybody? Okay.
Anybody not?
Yeah, does anybody not? Okay. Well, I'll keep the spiel short then about Lost Lantern. But as I think all of you know, we are an independent bottler of American whiskey. And what that means is we are not a distillery. We never will be. We don't want to be a distillery. Instead, our vision is to help people discover some of the great distilleries all across the country that are not as widely known or as widely available. It's very much based on the Scotch model. As I think some of you know, I used to write for Whiskey Advocate magazine, and Nora, my wife, used to run the sales floor at one of the best wine and spirit stores in New York City. So we saw that there was amazing whiskey being made all across the country, and a lot of it was very limited availability at the time, or people were so focused on the things that they already knew that they weren't necessarily going to try things that they never heard of, especially it's a brand that you never heard of. It's always a bit of a gamble to take a chance on it. So we said we can do that vetting process to curate the distilleries that are really worth people's attention. And while doing that, we can also bring some of the Scottish blending tradition into American whiskey. There have always been blends of American whiskey. There are some amazing ones here, but most of them are blends of Kentucky, Tennessee, Indiana, things like that. And we said that there are all these other distilleries out there, so why not play around with blending some of their whiskey too and create blends of states and distilleries that have never been blended before, sometimes just because they taste amazing, or sometimes because they taste amazing and they have some unifying theme to them, which is what we'll see with the two multi-distillery blends that we taste today. We also do a wide range of single casks, and as you can see up here, everything totally transparent, says exactly where it's from. For us, we want everyone to know exactly where this whiskey comes from, why we're excited about that place, what makes these places special out of the more than 3,000 distilleries in the United States, and I have no idea how many are around the world at this point. Because there's really special American whiskey being made that tastes different than what you get from more traditional places. And that's what we look for, that if a whiskey comes from someplace like Nevada or Minnesota, like we'll taste today, that shouldn't taste like Kentucky bourbon or Indiana rye, because it comes from a very different climate, and it's made in a slightly different way, aged in a very different climate, and as we'll taste today, made with grain grown from that place. So these whiskeys are all a little different than what is most familiar to most people. I know this is a crew that has tasted very widely in a lot of different things, but I still think there will be some fun surprises here. And at the end, we're going to taste a special whiskey that we'll talk about at that point. I switched that one to the very end instead of the last.
Because everyone loves the last whiskey when they're a little tipsy.
Yeah, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So what we're going to taste today, minus the special one at the end, is Lost Lantern's Summer Collection, which we just announced last week. This is the first in-person tasting I've done for it, so that's super fun. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you.
And our Summer Collection is called the Estate Collection. It's focused on estate distilleries, which means places that grow all of their own grain themselves on their own farm. And in the wine world, this is so extremely common that it's not even particularly notable. Like that it is, if you're drinking Napa Cab, it's at the very least assumed that most of the grapes came from Napa and often came from vines on that winery's property, or at least very close by. But that's not true in whiskey, or at least historically it hasn't been. The industry was too big, they were buying too much grain from all over the place. But nowadays there are distilleries around the US that are really trying to make whiskey that has a true sense of place, that reflects exactly where it comes from and only that place by growing grain that they grew themselves. There are other ones around the world you would probably know better than I do, places like Killamette that are growing all their own grain. But in American whiskey, it's really a relatively new thing. And we'll taste that these whiskeys come from very different climates, so the flavor profiles are very different, but philosophically, they all have a lot in common. And that'll lead us into the first whiskey, which is called Farmer's Fields Rye. So bottom left, it's open. You shout out the proofs on these as they come up.
Sure. 58.7, oh, I'm reading it. 58.7%.
So this first whiskey is one of the two flagship multi-distillery blends of the collection. It's a blend of whiskey from 4 different estate distilleries, the 4 that we're featuring throughout the collection. And we decided to do this because while these whiskeys all taste very different, they do share a common thread. The most important part of which is they all taste a little more like grain than you're probably used to from whiskey. Because if you're using really high quality grain that has much higher protein content and was carefully grown and cultivated for flavor rather than just to produce as much as possible, it will taste like more than commodity corn that gets sold by the rail car. So there's a definite freshness and graininess to all these whiskeys. Farmer's Fields Rye is a blended whiskey from 4 distilleries. Corbin Cash Distillery in California, which is a 100-year-old 5th-generation family sweet potato farm that grows rye in the winter as a cover crop and now distills it. Frey Ranch, which is a 5th-generation farm distillery in northern Nevada. Colby Frey, the co-founder there, always likes to say that even though they're only 5 generations, they've been there for 150 years, they just all had kids late. He's told me this 4 or 5 times now, so I think it's important that you all know that. Far North Spirits in northern Minnesota, which is a 5th-generation family farm. You may be noticing a trend here. In far northern Minnesota, it is in fact the northernmost distillery in the contiguous United States, meaning outside of Alaska. It is a little less than 2 hours from the Canadian border and less than an hour from North Dakota. And lastly is Whiskey Acres in Illinois, which is, wait for it, a 5th-generation family farm, this time in the Midwest and in the heart of corn country. So all 4 of these distilleries come from very different climates, and we'll dive a little more into each one of them as we go. But Corbin Cash, rye from a hot climate. Frey Ranch, rye from a dry climate. Far North, rye from a cold climate. And Whiskey Acres in Illinois, really the temperate climate, the more classic style. So each one of them is expressed differently, but we think that they come together in a really interesting way. Nora is our head blender, so if you hate it, that's her fault, and I appreciate that, and we'll pass the message along. But this is in some ways, the flagship blend of the collection. It includes all 4 of the distilleries we're featuring, and encapsulates what we're trying to say about these ambitious distilleries. They're really trying to change the way that whiskey is made. These are the kind of places that are never going to be the next Jim Beam. They don't want to make more whiskey than they can grow on their own farm. And if you're going a 2,000-acre farm, you can make a lot of whiskey, but you can't make millions and millions of bottles. Every distillery that we ever work with, I've visited in person, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of them as we go along. I think some of you probably know Frey Ranch pretty well already. Do you all like to talk about tasting notes as you go through, or do you just kind of?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Especially yours. Yeah, yours. Yeah.
Well, that breaks some of our rules, is we usually don't talk about tasting notes.
Let's break it.
And to me, all the estate ryes are very grassy and citrusy to me. It's like lemon, maybe a little bit of grapefruit, fresh cut grass. You get the oak spice, but it's a little more in the background, I think. This, when we launched these online this week, ended up being one of the 2 hits of the collection, which we were very excited about. Usually Single casks are the easy thing. Everyone understands that right away. A multi-distillery blend of distilleries that haven't been blended before is a little more unusual, but people were really receptive to this idea of here's whiskey from places that are quite different, but they have this one unifying thread of growing all their grain themselves. Anyone else?
Yeah, a couple questions. Obviously, climate is different in all of these places, but what about the grain itself? Like, are they using a similar type of rye, or are there actually differences between the grains that they're growing?
It varies a little bit. So Whiskey Acres and Far North actually both use exactly the same strain of rye. It's a cooler climate varietal developed in Canada called Hazlitt rye. Mike, the owner of Far North, always corrects me that it is not an heirloom rye because it only dates back to the 70s, but it is basically an engineered strain of rye that was bred to be hardier and in cold climates and to produce rye that has a lot more flavor than you get for commodity. Corbin Cash in California grows rye as a cover crop, and traditionally, like hot climates are not really where you grow rye; they grow it in the winter. So out there, it actually is an heirloom variety because it's not grown for any reason originally other than just to protect the soil during the winter. It's called Merced rye. It's specific to that area of California. And Frey Ranch, I'm actually not sure about their rye strain. They just call it winter rye. Yeah, but every one of them is different. Far North Spirits, which will taste third, actually has done a scientific study on rye. They got a grant from the University of Minnesota to plant multiple different crops of different strains of rye next to each other, and then distill them and age them and see, does the kind of grain that you use actually make a true difference in flavor over the years, and which ones are the best? And they started more than 5 years ago now and have been able to taste the 4-year-old expressions of different varieties of rye, and they're really wildly different from each other. You can have one that is very bready and others that are very grassy, and some that are kind of like musty, and they don't grow those ones anymore. What we always say about experiments is that if every experiment you're doing in whiskey works out, you're not really experimenting. You're just doing the easy thing. You have to do some things that don't work out to then come up with things that really can push the envelope forward. And we'll dive a little bit more into each distillery as we go, except for Corbin Cash. We didn't do a single cask with them in New York.
So is there a predominant distillery in this blend, or this one like kind of push forward more than others? Or,
it's a relatively, there's none that's more than 50%.
Okay.
Corbin Cash is a big chunk of it. Far North is a big chunk of it. Okay. Whiskey Acres is only a little, and Frey Ranch is like a medium amount.
Okay.
Because Whiskey Acres is mostly bourbon focused, but they do a little bit of rye. So we got them to give up a rye barrel for us for this. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions on the blend before we start moving to the first single casks?
Where's Whiskey Acres located?
They're in DeKalb, Illinois. They are less than an hour from O'Hare. So right outside of Chicago, like actually shockingly close how quickly it turns from big Chicago suburbs into corn country. Actually, when we talked to the Whiskey Acres guys recently, they're like, it's actually becoming a problem for farms in that area because you can keep your farm is worth tens of millions of dollars on paper and actually very little in terms of the cash flow you usually get from it. So it's much more lucrative for most of the farmers around them to just sell to developers, and then it turns into more suburbs.
Well, that's the home to Northern Illinois University too, right? So it's
there's a lot of demand for continued expansion in that area. Yeah. So they've actually been diversifying their business into things like whiskey, but also into building large-scale solar panels across their thousands of acres as a way to bring in extra revenue to be able to keep the farm and the family. Yeah.
What's the age of the youngest whiskey and the oldest whiskey in this blend?
This ranges from 3 to 8 years old. The Whiskey Acres is the youngest because they started doing rye a little later. The average is that other than the 3, everything is 5 to 8.
We have a note online here, cool limoncello note that he's never tasted in whiskey before. It's getting a little bit of that citrus.
Like that, yeah, that. Well, I'm a little late on saying cheers, but cheers. Any more thoughts on the blend before we go on to the second one?
Did anybody, when they taste this, think it wasn't a rye? Or didn't taste like a rye? No? Okay. Just curious. Everybody's palate's different, so.
Cool. All right, let's move on to the Frey Ranch single cask rye. How many of you have had something from Frey Ranch before? Okay. How many of you, if you haven't had them, do you know about them? Have any of you been there? When I asked that question in California, everybody, all the whiskey nerds have been there, because it's not that far. It's only like 4 hours from San Francisco. But Frey Ranch is one of our favorite whiskey distilleries in the entire country, and really in the world, because they're really the first pioneers of doing this estate distilling in the United States at any kind of scale. They also are growing whiskey in an environment where I didn't know you could grow anything. Like I'm from the East Coast. I'm from around here actually, so I didn't know that you could grow grain in Nevada. But they're actually in a unique pocket near the town of Fallon, where there's a lot of groundwater. There's runoff from the Sierras, so there's still not very much rain, but they're in a climate where people have actually been able to farm for about 150 years now. The Frey family were the first American settlers in this region. They got there in the 1850s, about 10 years before Nevada became a state. So really very early to northern Nevada. And since then, they've been farming the land, the particular farm they've on now that they've had for about 70 years. But they've really learned how to work the land in this unique dry climate in a way that's sustainable for more than a century. They're not tearing up the land. They've been able to maintain their family there for this whole amount of time. And the latest generation of the family, the fifth generation, decided that they were tired of basically selling alfalfa overseas and wanted to do something that for 150 years they've been growing here, and for the last lifetime or two, they weren't really seeing the fruits of their labors. They're just like, you sell it off, it goes away, you never see anything with it. Like, it would be cool to hold something in our hands that was made with our crop that we've grown here. And that's why they decided to start making whiskey. They're the oldest legal distillery in Nevada. I think they've gotten beat out by a couple of illegal distilleries in Nevada over the years. Lots of illegal things in Nevada. But now have a really refined whiskey program. And what I've learned, I've been to Frey Ranch 3 or 4 times now. It's about an hour east of Reno. It is not in the hot desert that you associate with Vegas. If any of you have been to Reno, it's much more mountainous. I've been there both in the summer when it's 95 to 100 degrees, and in the winter when it feels like the winter around here. Like, it is a 4-season climate, albeit a very dry one. So this is not hot desert. But that leads to really interesting maturation for whiskey, because there are big swings in temperature from the day to the night and across the year. Every season is different. You get a lot of movement of the liquid in the barrel, and we find that lets their whiskey develop a lot of character relatively quickly. This is the first rye we've ever done for them. We've worked with Frey Ranch a number of times. When we did our Summer of Bourbon release a few years ago, we were able to get 6 barrels of bourbon from them, which was 3 times more than they had ever let anyone else get. So we figured it was a little too much to ask for a rye too. But this time when we went back to them, we said, all right, now's the time. We want a rye and we want something unusual, which we'll taste a little later. This is a 100% rye, 100% winter rye grown on Frey Ranch. So it's effectively a cover crop for them too. This one, what's the proof on this one?
59.3.
And take a little closer.
I like it, you know, it's like more vinyl than car seats.
Yeah, I was gonna even there car seats. Later car seats.
Like if you had like a 1960s station wagon with vinyl seats, and it got really hot, there's a comforting smell from my childhood.
Wow.
Very specific.
I was just double checking the age. So this is a 6-year-old rye. 6-year-old rye, cast strength, single cask. And I think their rye is really special, which is why it was hard to not try to get one from them 2 years ago, and why we're very happy to now, because you don't see that many 100% ryes out there, certainly not from this kind of a dry climate. And I think it's like, I would have said exactly what he said with the car seat, the exact model of the car.
With chocolate melted on it. Yeah, and then you sat on the chocolate.
Cigarette smoke.
Can you speak to, you know, when you see 100% rye about enzymes and what their process is? I don't think we realize what's being used for that.
Yeah, so if you have a whiskey that is 100% of a grain that is not barley and it's not malted, the reason that malted barley was originally used in whiskey is it actually catalyzes the conversion of starch into sugar in the fermentation process. So if you have 100% rye like this is, you actually have to add enzymes to it to make the reaction happen. So this is like, it's less weird than it sounds when I first heard about it. It's just like, basically have like a bucket with some goo in it and you just throw the goo into, which is, it's basically like.
I love it, that's very scientific,
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
so enzymes
The
equals
term
goo.
goo, yeah.
Yeah.
Very
Car seat goo?
Glue or glue?
Goo. And it basically just looks like slightly less than clear liquid. You just throw it in there and it catalyzes the reaction. And while some distilleries also do a portion of the whiskey with malt in it, so it might be 75% rye, 25% malted rye. This particular one is not like that. It can be any grain. Does that answer the question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just that when you
With
see
the
that
goo.
100%, there's a little change in production.
You'll see if you have any of the Farmer's Fields rye left, or if you have your empty glass, I would go back to it and smell that again, just to see if you can pick out some of the same notes from the Frey Ranch that you've had it on its own in the Farmer's Fields rye.
So everything we have done for rye is 100% rye? They've never done alternative?
At least everything that they've officially put out. They do a lot of weird things because their attitude is, we have a distillery and we have a lot of grain, so why not play around with it? Which will lead again into the second to last one we do. But their rye that's on the market is 100% rye. One of the great things about Frey Ranch is they've really become a cult distillery on the West Coast. Kind of in the same way that Starlight has here, but I would say even more, where like it's a really cool spot being able to see a farm that is growing the grain for the whiskey. And every whiskey club we've been to in San Francisco, at least half the people have been out there and fired the corn cannon. But they never let me fire the corn cannon, which I think means they take me too seriously. I don't know why. But
What is a corn cannon?
I don't know because they haven't let me fire it. But everyone talks about it. All of the whiskey people we know, they're like, went out to Frey Ranch and fired the corn cannon.
Like a potato cannon?
I think so.
They have one at Elm Farms.
Actually,
You want to get your fix, they have one there.
I think so.
they'll let you do it too.
Elms Farms in Charlton, every fall you can do the corn cannon.
Yeah. Just saved you a trip to Nevada. But the interesting thing about them is, like I said before, these distilleries can only make so much whiskey with their own grain. So they've really stayed focused on the West Coast. They don't do anything east of the Mississippi that I know of, and are definitely not in New York, but have a really good reputation. They're one of the distilleries that many people that we talk to have heard of, but haven't been able to get. So that's one of the things that we as an independent bottler can do. So this is the only way to get Frey Ranch in New York. So. And it's a distillery that a lot of people know and are very excited about. And I have a cool handkerchief.
Just so everyone knows tonight too, because I let the online people know, so I don't want you to feel left out. But it's $5 off all Lost Lantern bottles tonight only.
Okay.
So
And they're all 99. so it'd be 94, 99.
Yeah.
so.
And any of the releases that we're not tasting tonight too, we have some of their other stuff on the shelves, but just a heads up so you can plan what you might want.
And there is, if you do decide to order while you're sitting at the table, in case you're worried about something disappearing, there is a coupon code, right?
Yeah, oh, if you order online, I guess, yeah, people shouldn't run up and grab the bottle. It could, I guess, we've had that before, but if you buy it online, it's just Lost Lantern all
With a
together.
space or no?
No,
Did you guys do anything to age this differently or finish it?
No, so for our single cask program, unlike our blends, we're generally trying to showcase that whiskey in a similar way that a distillery would. So if it's a distillery that you don't know, and if you like this, you will also like what they make. And if you don't like this, you probably won't like what they make either. That's different for some of our blends, like the Farmer's Fields or like Desert Dessert, which is the whiskey we have here that comes from just one distillery, but that's a blend of multiple different barrels that's aimed to show a different side of that distillery. If it's just a single cask and all it says is the distillery's name, we probably haven't really done anything to it besides buy the barrel, move it to Vermont, so that we think this is an amazing single cask and bottle it and put it out that way. Cask strength, non-chill filtered, et cetera, et cetera. Any other questions on this one, or should we go on to Minnesota?
Just curious, real quick, when you're at Frey Ranch and you're negotiating barrels and all of that, you said you didn't ask for a rye one a couple of years ago, but you did now. Are you just getting one barrel of rye from them, or are you able to get more because of your reputation at this point?
We're able to get more, and we usually like to buy barrels at least 4 at a time, and because we're putting them on a pallet and moving them from Nevada to Vermont, and that the costs of doing that with 4 barrels and doing it with 1 barrel are basically the same for the transport. Which is the interesting thing about being an independent bottler in the U.S. instead of Scotland. Scotland is pretty small, and the United States is not, so there's a lot of terrain that these barrels have to move over. But we always try to buy a few barrels. Some of them are for blends, some of them are for single casks, some of them are for special projects, and sometimes we just don't really know what we're going to do when we buy it. We're like, this is great, we want to have it, can we get it?
Yeah.
And a lot of distilleries now, especially if we worked with them a few times, really trust us. And like when we did the Farmer's Fields, Bourbon, and Rye, we offered to all 4 of the distilleries, like, we will send you a sample of this whiskey before we bottle it, because your name is on the label. Like for the blends too, the distillery names are right on the front label. And they all 4 of them said, we don't need to taste it, we trust you.
Cool.
Which is stressful. But we also take it as a huge vote of confidence in what we're doing. And the way that they see us reflecting them. Right? If this, we're out here doing a tasting about them in Saratoga, in the state that they're not even in. But hopefully you all get excited about it. All right, let's go to Minnesota. This is sort of a gimme question, but have any of you ever been to remote northern Minnesota?
No.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Watch Fargo.
I found far north, honestly, because of what they do in whiskey sustainability. They, both of the founders of this, Mike, the 5th generation farmer, and Sherry, his wife, are former environmental consultants and environmental people, like advocacy work from Chicago, and eventually after more than 20 years moved back to his family farm and said, I'm going to implement some of these regenerative agricultural practices on my farm and also try to create something in a community where there are really not a ton of jobs. Like most of the people who work at the distillery, especially in the winter, are also farmers during the summer. And this is something for them to do to make some money in the off season. They've also invested a lot in their distillery to preserve heat, because I don't know if anyone knows that Minnesota can be very cold, but they found ways to use the heat that is generated by the still itself effectively to heat the whole building during the winter without any extra use of heat or any loss of it, or minimal loss of it outside of it otherwise. So that's how I first came across them when I was a journalist. I was writing a story about sustainability in whiskey and came across this Minnesota distillery. One of the rules that we have is that we will only work with a distillery if we visited them in person. which is why Nora and I started a company with an 8-month road trip around the United States. We did not make it to northern Minnesota at that point, and this is the first whiskey we've ever released from them. And the only reason we haven't worked with them before is that they are really in the middle of nowhere. And I ended up taking a special trip to visit them, flying from Burlington, Vermont to Fargo, North Dakota, and driving 2.5 hours north of there to visit them. And have any of you been to North Dakota before, or it was not what I expected, especially this particular area. Kansas has a reputation for being flat, and I've been to Kansas, and this area of Minnesota and the North Dakota area right near it is much, much flatter than that. It is actually one of the 2 flattest areas of the country. Like if you look at the elevation gain over time, that's because it's in an old glacial river valley. It's in the Red River of the North. Has jet black soil that is extremely fertile, which is why it's a major farming region despite having a growing season of like 3 or 4 months. And you're still able to grow grain there, but they do some bourbon. Most of what they do is rye, because rye grows a lot better than corn in northern Minnesota. And this is also where I learned that if you have a 1,500-acre farm, how many people would you guess it takes to farm 1,500 acres of grain? 2 or 3. With modern equipment. Mike does most of it himself with a little help from his brother, and that's really
Is
all.
that their gig? I mean, it's just the rye and the 1,500 acres, or is it, do they have other crops?
It's all grain. It's mostly rye, because that grows well there. But I think they do a little bit of corn. A lot of their neighbors do sugar beets. There's a lot of sugar beet processing in North Dakota. That does not distill into anything interesting. You don't want it. So this is a 4-year-old single cask rye. This is the mash bill in this one. I forget, so I'll just tell you. The good thing is I don't have to memorize the mash bills anymore because I just put them on the label. 65% Hazlitt rye, 25% heirloom corn, 10% malted barley. Both the rye and the corn come from their farm. They found they can't grow barley basically at all there, so they get that from another place a little further south in Minnesota, which sort of stretches our definition for a state, but we figure that counts if you literally can't grow it. It is only 4 years old, so this has a little less oak influence, partly because it's from such a cool climate. And I think this is a very unusual rye. It's very herbal and bright, and like it's like walking into an herb garden for me. And really much less of the oak that you would get from a Kentucky rye. I don't know if you both agree with that.
Yeah,
for sure.
What's the proof?
This one is 55.8, so 111, 112 proof.
This is the breakfast whiskey.
What's the ABV? 55.8. And I found in the tastings we've done in the tasting room for this, that people often tend to have a strong preference for either this or the Frey Ranch, and it tends to be pretty split which way it is, because they're really very different whiskeys, and which is what we wanted to show with this estate collection, that these are all whiskeys that are made in the same way, and the main difference between them is the way that the grain is grown, the specific type of grain that is grown, and the climate where that whiskey is aged. And this shows just how much of a difference that can make.
Would you say the climate is, you might not know, but the driving that flavor change, obviously the mash bill, or is it the varietal rye?
I would say it has more to do with the climate. The farm, I don't know if all 4 of the farms would agree with me on that. I think that we would probably all have a good argument about is it
That's
the
the
grain
beauty
type
of it
or the
too,
climate.
yeah.
Yeah. But both of I've tasted both the Far North rye and the Whiskey Acres rye, which we don't have as a single cask, but have almost the same mash bill, and they also taste quite different. So that makes me think it's at least partly climate.
Quite a few notes here online. Dill and mint, pickle juice, mojito, orange dipped in dark cocoa, an exotic spice, maybe coriander, herbal tea, maybe mint, palate, black tea with mint, very herbal, very grain forward, quite a bit of caramel, light rye bread with cinnamon sugar, anise. Molly says black tea for sure.
I got the.
But the nose is rather, I put banana nut bread in it. Like it was a soft, I didn't get the herbal tip in the palate.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit of a softer rye. It's a little more delicate.
Yeah.
The Frey Ranch, I think, is a little more familiar to me as someone who makes a lot of Kentucky rye. It's still a different climate, but it's very balanced oaken grain, and this is like all about the grain and herbal flavors. And we'll see that when we get to the Whiskey Acres bourbon a little bit too. Ready to move on to bourbon, or any more questions on this? I don't want to take too
Just
long on
curious,
anyone.
between the Frey Ranch and the Whiskey Acre, or Far North, well, I know he was talking 50-50 split. Well, I'm just curious what the group here thinks in terms of the split. So let's say Frey Ranch, raise your hand. And then Whiskey Acres.
Far North.
Far North, sorry. Yeah, so about 50.
I think somebody raised your hands twice.
They were different hands.
I'll allow it. You are allowed to like both of
Oh, mine.
So let's move on to bourbon, unless there's any more questions here in the chat. Cool. So next up is the last one on the bottom row, Farmer's Fields Bourbon. I'm gonna get a quick pour of that too. So this is Farmer's Fields Bourbon. This is the counterpart to Farmer's Fields Rye, the two multi-distillery blends of the series. And we chose the name Farmer's Fields because, as you've heard me talk about, all of the estate distilleries that we've worked with, and in fact, every estate distillery in the country that I know of was actually a farm first, usually for multiple generations. It is very expensive and difficult to start an estate distillery, especially if you don't already have the land that lets you do that, to grow the crops. So we thought the name Farmer's Field captures that whiskey is fundamentally an agricultural product. It's something that comes from the land, which means really we're drinking our vegetables here. So I think we can feel good about that.
Do you find any pushback, or how do people feel or react to the term blended?
I feel like that's a good question. People definitely have polarizing. The question was, how do people react to the term blended when it comes to whiskey? And it's definitely a polarizing term. Some people, we even had one of our regulars in our tasting room, didn't want to taste the Farmer's Fields because it was like, I only drink single casks. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But I think that a single casks are amazing, and they show one aspect of one particular whiskey at one moment in time. But a blend is like working with a full palette of colors. Lets you play and bring things that are totally different together in a new way. So you've now tasted several of the components of the Farmer's Fields whiskeys in different ways, and then the blends, and see they taste different than any of the components. Farmer's Fields Bourbon is a little higher proof than the rye. This is 59%. This is a blend of whiskey from only 3 distilleries, from Whiskey Acres, Frey Ranch, and Far North. So Minnesota, Nevada, Illinois. Corbin Cash is not in it because they don't grow corn. They sometimes distill corn from their neighbor's farm, but that we decided that doesn't count. You have to grow it yourself. So
They could have, unlike.
yeah, exactly. They could have, but he doesn't want to because, I quote, corn is a pain. We've really enjoyed getting to know these distilleries and the people who run them. We did a media event with all of them together. And the 4 distillers and owners ended up like geeking out amongst themselves about like rye protein levels for like 25 minutes. And so we were like, guys, we gotta go. This is
A lot of viscosity on this one. Yeah.
I think you will see as we taste the bourbons that these are even more different than standard Kentucky bourbons than the ryes are. Because they are all quite bringing forward in different ways. You can taste the corn in it. Like, it's a truism in the whiskey industry. I'm sure you two have heard this a million times in Scotland. that 90% of a whiskey's flavor comes from the barrel. And these distillers will argue with you that the reason that 90% of a whiskey's flavor comes from the barrel is that they're using cheap grain that doesn't taste like anything. And if you use grain that does taste like something, you will taste the grain. So to me, this is like basically like liquid cornbread with a little bit of maple syrup on it.
What about the terroir question? How do these farmers feel about their grain and their soil and where it's coming from? And do you feel we need a different word in whiskey because of distillation?
The question was, how do people feel about the word terroir in whiskey? Besides that, I'm not very good at pronouncing it. As I learned when I went to Montreal 2 weeks ago, my French accent was terrible.
Terror.
Yeah, exactly. There are people who prefer the word provenance or provenance rather than terroir. I don't care. To me, we just say it's whiskey with a sense of place. And all of these farms and distilleries exist because they believe in that as an idea. That there's no reason to go through all this trouble of growing the grain yourself when you can buy it for probably a tenth of the price from Cargill and they found the whiskey, unless you think that it actually matters and makes a difference. And there's room for whiskey of all types. There's room for estate whiskey, and there's room for much larger whiskeys that are made from grain from elsewhere but are aged for longer and showcase different aspects. But we think it's really special and unique to see ones that do truly reflect these individual places. Yeah.
Question. So I'm still sort of new to this, and I come from a wine background, and I don't believe anything on a wine label except maybe parts of France. And I know this having worked in wineries and seeing what's done. I have a question about the idea of a single cask. So I was enjoying the ideas of the blending. Single cask, does that begin and end once the cask is full? Or were they blending, topping off other casks into that cask as we would do in wine? We're filling it as there's evaporation. So is that typical? That's part of how this is done. So if we have a single cask, other things have gone into that ultimately. I'm just sort of curious about what that means.
That's a really good question that no one has ever asked before, and it's something that we talk about a little bit. Distillers don't routinely top a whiskey barrel off along the course of its maturation, but that doesn't mean they never do. Like they're not going to add like a couple gallons to it every year, but what they might do is after 5 years or 7 years when the barrel's half empty, they may combine 2 barrels into 1 barrel of the same whiskey that both mostly evaporated. And sometimes they still call it a single cask at that point. That has not been the case for any of these. But it's something that we talk a little bit. Like, if it didn't start as a single cask, is it really a single cask? And I think we're leaning towards no, but we would accept counter arguments on that.
Maybe mention like the finishing, how that could still be a single cask.
Yeah.
It's called Solera. So Hill Rock. It's the
It's a can of worms right there.
It's not normally. I need a new, I know we're gonna be sensitive, but I don't want to use
Right.
it.
Some barrels are small.
Yeah.
I think so.
Oh, if I go to
What's the next one? We'll go visit Hill Rock in a couple months, and then you can see it. All right, Shalom. Thanks, Shalom.
Right.
Sorry, we're moving on.
Let's go.
My fault.
Let's go to the back row. Whiskey Acres.
There was a question, well, actually a couple questions before we move on the blend.
Yeah.
Similar question to what I asked with the rye. Is there a distillery that's more dominant in this blend? Obviously, Whiskey Acres is probably a smaller amount like before, or?
This is, I have to look at the percentages, but the largest component is Frey Ranch for this one.
And is the Frey Ranch mash bill that's in that the same as the Frey Ranch mash bill in your single
Yes,
cast?
it's the same mash bill. It is not the same barrel. It was another barrel
Mash
with
bills.
similar specs, but yeah.
Okay.
Which is not always true. Sometimes we use a portion of the barrel for a blend and then put out the rest as a single barrel.
Right.
We pull out a little bit, which is why sometimes you get 60 bottle single barrels from us for a 53 gallon barrel, because we use the rest of it for something else.
So,
Yeah.
question about the farmers' fields in general, are they, when you're doing a blend of 3 or a blend of 4, is each of them a single barrel that you're blending, or are you using more than one barrel of one of the distilleries?
It can be more than one barrel. It can be less than one barrel. It can be like a third of or half a barrel. I think it ended up having portions of 2 different Frey Ranch barrels and 1 Whiskey Acres and 1 Far North. But I would have to. It might have been 2 Whiskey Acres. I'd have to double check. Nora runs the blending program. The vision for it really is just to continue to iterate on it until we get it to the best spot that we can. We start with making small tabletop blends after tasting all the components. Do a first round, then pick the best one from the first round, look at what made that one interesting, and then what wasn't quite right, tweak it, do another round, and continue that way until you start to hit diminishing returns where it's not getting better anymore. And then we compare it against the most similar whiskey that we've put out or that someone else has put out. Like we tasted this against our Far Flung bourbon and also against Frey Ranch and Whiskey Acres and Far North on their own to make sure that it was interesting and different enough for them to be standalone in its own right. I'm curious if you have any of the rye left, how you feel between the Farmers Fields bourbon and the Farmers Fields rye.
I don't know, because it was 3 tenants rise, but the bourbon didn't strike me as a strong bourbon. It didn't have that vanilla or but it was still tasty. Yeah, if it was, we were joking back here, if it was part of the advent calendar, I probably wouldn't have called it right.
Yeah.
Right.
Going away?
Sure.
All right. Moving to the back row, starting on the left again. Yeah. Taking like 1 sip of each, but it's nice to know that goes along.
What's the Adam blend?
So this is a single cask straight bourbon from Whiskey Acres. This is 75% yellow dent corn, which is basically normal corn, 15% wheat, and 10% barley. So it's a wheated bourbon. All of the grains were grown on their farm. Before visiting them, I had never been on a truly modern farm before on this scale, 2,000 acres. They're one of the smallest farms in their area. Some of them get up to 20,000 acres, which is, I don't know, roughly the size of Vermont or something. But not really. But Nora got to ride on their tractor, which is substantially bigger than this room. Probably the size, close to the size of the building. Those tractors cost well north of $1 million. And what we were really impressed by at Whiskey Acres is how much they use modern science and data to grow grain. They were very proud to show us their computer system, which lets them track the micro conditions in every portion of their farm, so that they can say, like, there's this one part where there's like a little bit of a dip, and we can, in the ground level, we can check the moisture level on there remotely and see, or the humidity, or the temperature, and get a sense of how the corn is growing over there, or this other spot where it's a little hotter and there isn't as much water. And that gives them an incredible amount of information about how their grain is growing. And as someone who likes data and is a data nerd, but did not you could do that in a natural environment on a farm, I thought that was really cool and unique to see. They age some of their whiskey in old silos and grain bins. So the kind of big metal ones that you see if you're driving up to Vermont, they've got whiskey in places like that. And those get extremely hot in the summer and extremely cold in the winter. So they get a little bit more temperature variation than you would expect for the temperate climate in Illinois. So it's a wheated bourbon, so it's a little on the softer, creamier side, very fruity to me. This is 5 years old, 59 point something.
Point one.
And this is the most temperate climate of the distilleries in the collection. So not the extremes of Minnesota or Nevada or the Central Valley of California, but really the heart of the Corn Belt, where most of the grain in the country is grown. It's from Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, etc.
So what's the name, the farm isn't called Whiskey Acres, right? That's the distillery.
It's some like, I don't know what the
They
name.
must have just named it that for their.
They may have officially changed it at this point. Frey Ranch has officially changed theirs to Frey Ranch Whiskey Farm, which is that's what it is. That's most of what they use their grain for now.
Yeah.
And it captures the idea that this is a product that was grown. This did not come into existence out of nowhere. It was not made in a factory. It was made from grain grown on a farm. But I don't know what they're called. What Whiskey Acres calls their farm.
Some notes of peanut. There's been a couple people who mentioned peanut butter on cornbread, peanut shell, cinnamon spice, creamy.
It's definitely on the lighter side for a little bit, like less oak heavy. To me, the most grain forward of all these, maybe along with the far north, but
Yeah, I can do that.
I find that can sometimes be unusual for people who are really used to a more oak forward bourbon, but it adds so much additional complexity and nuance and flavor to it.
Yeah, there's like a nut dryness.
Yeah.
It's not oak, it's like, maybe that's the wheat, you know, that kind of.
Yeah.
Sweet, dry, nut, you know, like a walnut.
Almost really is a walnut too.
Hazelnut, yeah.
Had I had Whiskey Acres before? I assume you would not have fun with it. Frey Ranch, I know you have.
That's it.
Yeah.
Research one of your
Yeah.
which I like yours. What do people think of Whiskey Acres?
I like it.
They make the wheat whiskey.
Not that they've released Whiskey Acres. This is made with yellowneck corn. They also grow a lot of heirloom corn. So they've done individual releases of green Oaxacan corn bourbon, blue popcorn bourbon, white bourbon, or like white corn bourbon, gem corn, green corn bourbon. All of which are totally different from each other.
That was thrown on there.
In decent volume, like.
It usually ends up being like they do like because they basically have experimented to see which ones are good. And there's some that they don't make anymore, like the green Mexican corn does not go well. It's this year. So it's some of the areas.
Yeah, but blended. All right, are we ready to move on to the next bourbon?
I believe we are, Holly.
We are.
Yeah,
Thanks, Dan.
you're welcome. Hey, let me know if you need me to announce anything from the back of the room here.
All right.
Well, I simultaneously don't want to rush people and don't want to dawdle.
Okay, we're 40 and everybody
Yeah,
knows.
we're-
We're Lori, can you hear it? We're not. Right?
Now we're going to Frey
I
Ranch
wasn't sure if you
bourbon.
were joking or not. Oh, we're on number 6.
They weren't big fours, but it's all cash.
Yeah, I'm retired, I don't need to worry about nothing.
As Charles said, these are all cast strength, and as I like to say, plan accordingly.
Yes.
So this is Frey Ranch's bourbon. Almost all the bourbon that they normally release as part of their flagship line, including this, is for grain bourbon. So corn, rye, wheat, and malt. Corn is 67%. The others are all about 11 to 12. And I find that their bourbon always gives me two predominant flavor notes, which are, always has like a black cherry note, and it's always quite earthy. And to me, that reflects, again, that this is an agricultural product. It's definitely a different flavor profile. So, this is a 6-year-old bourbon, 62%, so starting to get a little higher up there proof-wise. This particular barrel, we only released in New York and Massachusetts because California can get as much Frey Ranch as they want, and people here can't get that at all. So we figured it was a good way to split it up and help some of our friends here get a bourbon people are very excited about.
No, I didn't. Well, she's used to like being sick, so when you're up here, it is good. It didn't feel like it, it honestly didn't. Yeah. No, I mean, we're just picking on it.
Oh.
You like this one?
Oh, we just the whiskey, I think that's.
I do like
So would anybody have recognized that this is a 4-grain bourbon?
No.
Oh, no.
How about you?
Yeah.
It'd be tough. It's very well balanced. All of the different grains.
Would you tell Charles that I can't follow what he's saying?
Charles,
Hey,
you can't
Charles.
follow what you're saying.
Actually, you can
That doesn't taste like a 4. I wasn't.
Yeah.
No
All right.
one's listening.
Nobody listens.
The only person who was listening couldn't hear us. So 4 grain, again, all grown on their farm. Curious what you'll think of this in comparison to the Whiskey Acres or to the Frey Ranch Rye, if you still remember.
Interesting, I get the black cherry and the rye, I don't get it in. It's different kind of burials, like all the black cap, you know, that
Oh, yeah.
wild raspberry.
Yeah.
It's a fruity.
I picked a bunch of black raspberries yesterday, so
Oh, okay.
understand.
Okay.
Really well, that balance is unbelievable. 62%, I could drink this all night.
So strong.
You don't want to be around
So far, my favorite.
Chocolate, I guess, cherry. Yeah. I like the chocolate.
I've said this before, I'll probably say it again. This is a very balanced bourbon, but it does not taste like a Kentucky bourbon. And that's because it's not from Kentucky, it's from Nevada, so it should taste like that.
Okay, with room jackpot.
Any questions about the Frey Ranch bourbon, or should we keep going?
No, let's just hold on for a second.
Yeah, it's not-
I know.
Tasted this one for a minute.
Their code is not my third versus one.
That was my impression of everything. Saratoga Summer was always and I had last year's thought, and I loved it.
Yeah, it is.
Still with the same Saratoga, but just like, with a really nice balance of the really hot and sweet.
Oh, I would consider buying
Everything else is out.
That's not big. I hear that. Like that. What?
I'm putting them all on.
I mean, glass size is very.
Open up.
I thought I
only have one glass.
Together.
The one there.
I'm nervous about that.
Oh,
Oh, no, we're doing a weed.
We're doing the weed next week.
Just so everybody knows, we're swapping the next two. So we're gonna do
you were right.
Saratoga Summer last.
Oh, let online, you were right.
We get to, can we go around
We're
there?
just hoping. You know, like 8 is not enough.
I want you to be hammered when you taste Saratoga Summer.
No, we're not nervous about it.
I think that was a no, Charles.
I'm not.
So we're doing the weeded one now?
Yeah, we're gonna go to the weed unless there are any questions on the bourbon.
I just recommend a piece of chocolate with it, get that cherry taste.
You wanna mention that? We're gonna do.
You gotta try it.
Yeah, for online people, we're doing the Frey Ranch wheat whiskey next.
Don't worry about it first.
So. That's why I like coming here, because you can keep comfort. I don't do it at home. I don't know when I cut a cucumber. Just how fun.
So, for those of you who don't know, our labels have a color scheme. Anything in blue is always a multi-distillery blend. Anything in red is a bourbon. Anything in green is a rye, and the Frey Ranch wheat and anything else in the cream label is weird. So,
Love it.
Are we on the weird one
we're
now?
on the weird one, yeah.
Okay.
So blue is multi. Yeah, blue is multi-distillery. The Farmers Fields Bourbon and Rye, they have a bourbon has a red top strip, rye has a green top strip. It's red and green for bourbon and rye. And then I joke and say it's weird, but really means anything that's unusual or doesn't fit into its own category. And as a 100% wheat whiskey, the Frey Ranch wheat, which again is the last one, we're skipping ahead, definitely qualifies as unusual. I wanna-
Sit there. That's the trouble. Usually, where the trouble is.
This is 60.7.
Handle this.
So I'm guessing at least some of you are weeded bourbon fans.
Take it out of it.
What did you say the ABV was on this?
60.7.
Thanks.
So this is obviously not a weeded bourbon. It's instead a 100% wheat whiskey. So get rid of all that corn and just go wheat. So 100% soft white winter wheat, which is a mouthful.
Oh, I have a question.
What's your question, Holly?
I have a question. I have to wait for Charles though.
Go ahead.
So for Maker's Mark or Weller from Buffalo Trace, what's the wheat they're using there?
That's a good question. I think the wheat they're using is just wheat.
Just the like the
Yeah.
corn commodity wheat. Okay.
So we, in the course of putting together this collection, we've learned a lot about how grain is normally treated in the whiskey world outside of farm distilleries, which is that like when we describe something as being made from commodity corn, the reason it's called that is it's considered all corn that is grown and sold in the commodity market is considered completely interchangeable. If it is grown in Minnesota or Canada or Texas or Mexico, if it is sold as commodity corn, it's some kind of yellow corn, and it is sold for the same price wherever it comes from, and it is all dumped together, and you can't even tell what farm it came from. So 100 farms in Minnesota may be combined together in one grain facility, then shipped down to be combined with 1,000 other farms from all across the country. And so I don't actually know what they use for, you could look up what Star Hill is made from if they're talking about that. But, that's one of the nice things about these smaller distilleries in general, even if they don't grow it all themselves, is they can tell you exactly what grain it was and why they chose that particular varietal. And for this, it's because soft white winter wheat is the kind of winter wheat that grows best at Frey Ranch, and they think is the most flavor. We've done a couple different wheat whiskeys. 2 of them have been winter wheat and white winter wheat, and 1 of them has been red winter wheat. And I honestly feel like I haven't had enough different types from the same distillery to be able to talk about the differences between the different types of wheat as opposed to where they come from. But for this 100% white winter wheat, it captures what I really love about wheat whiskey and why it's a style I'm really excited about, which is that it has a huge depth of flavor and complexity to it, but also this beautiful softness. It's not sharp or spiky, at least to me. It's very rounded and welcoming, while still being quite fruity.
What's the alcohol?
This is like, you don't want to.
Not the reviews matter, but it's really good. But it matters, it matters. I did it. I did it on my cat. Okay.
Oh my God, this is a beautiful whiskey.
We should mention
Just a heads up.
Let's let the online
So this was 2 of these whiskeys from this collection. We Holly prefaced it by saying not that reviews matter, but also we like them, especially when they're good. We sent these into Breaking Bourbon, which is one of the big bourbon websites, and both this and the Farmer's Fields Rye got a 4.5 barrels out of 5 from them, which they do about 4 or 5 reviews that high per year, so we were very happy with that. The Frey Ranch wheat sold out on all the online retailers that had it sold out within 2 minutes of when it launched, so we were pleased by that. And one of the only places left that has it is here, but there's only a little bit of it. So if you want this one, you should probably.
Technically 3 bottles.
And grab one.
Technically.
Reach around Charles and grab one, Heather.
We have 4 bottles.
You better off just ordering online.
3.
And change it.
I owe her a lot.
You're on my computer.
Oh, you do?
I do.
Charles, if you really want one, you can come to the tasting room.
Yeah.
Oh, someone has your restricted tasting room.
Oh dear.
Oh, no. Orders for everybody else. I don't know how much this was.
So there are 3 single casks from Frey Ranch that we tasted. If you still have your glasses, if there's anything in them, I think it's worth doing a quick comparison between the Frey Ranch Rye, the Frey Ranch Bourbon, and the Frey Ranch Wheat. There is some continuity between them. There's a very clear textural similarity to me. They're all quite rounded, and a similar depth of flavor, I think. Shows their range. They're basically the featured distillery of the collection. We know them well, and really wanted to show that this is a distillery that does more than just one thing. We do a lot of different things.
So this is 100%.
100% wheat. And they normally only release their experimental whiskeys, which this would count as in their tasting room in Fallon, Nevada. So part of the reason we're so excited about it is it's a lot easier to go to Fallon, Nevada. Any questions or thoughts on this one or the estate collection in general before we move on from that?
Whose estate is best?
I haven't heard that.
You can't say that, but they can.
The most fun distillery to visit of these 4 is Frey Ranch in Nevada.
And who's the worst?
Don't say it, don't do it.
Who let you in here?
Go ahead and do it.
Charles, are you saying that there's one that you wouldn't visit?
First fill spirits.
I will say,
We're not a farm.
when I went to Corbin Cash, which we didn't taste a single cask from, that's part of Farmer's Fields Rye. Seeing the distillery is cool, but they're primarily a sweet potato farm, and they actually are the largest producer of seed sweet potatoes in the country. And you can buy seed potatoes for your garden. They make seed sweet potatoes for other sweet potato growers. And we got to go see their sweet potato packing plant.
That sounds fascinating.
I've been to several hundred distilleries. I've only been to one sweet potato packing plant.
That's how many
Would
we
you
eat.
like a recipe for sweet potato biscuits? They're quite good.
They are probably good. And much noisier than the distillery, actually.
Do they make sweet potato vodka there?
They do actually distill sweet potatoes. They
All
have,
right, then let's go.
they have a sweet potato vodka, they have a sweet potato spirit, which is not distilled to as high a proof, so it's basically made as if it were a whiskey, except it's sweet potatoes. And they've done a sweet potato, a bourbon finished in a sweet potato spirit cask. I didn't get to have this experience, but Nora did when she went out there. She went there more recently than I did. And she said David, the founder there, let her taste some rye whiskeys that were made from fields that previously had sweet potatoes, and then other ones were those rye that were fields that previously had almond trees. And they were tasted totally different. So you can, and this is true in wine too, is you can taste other things that were nearby in some way, which is why you want it to be nice things like sweet potatoes or almonds and not like a Gowanus Canal or something.
Holly's pulling on. What's going on?
For all those Brooklyn Farm distilleries.
How do you happen to pick up Gowanus Canal?
I lived in Brooklyn for a long time. Any other thoughts or questions on the estate collection before we move on to something totally different?
And now for something completely different.
Anything from the chat?
Cue the Monty Python music.
Have you settled whether we have 3 or 4 favorites?
Wait, what did you buy? Frey wings. He's gonna let me hear some.
Get on your phone, girl.
On your phone is what you did.
Oh.
Are we ready to do Saratoga?
Charles wanted to leave for this.
Gotta go upstairs.
What are you so afraid of?
Should we tell the story?
Yeah. Oh, I want to hear the story.
I don't remember.
I don't know what story you're going to tell.
I'll grab the. They're right here.
Oh, it's up here.
Well, yeah, but these were all. Very organized.
It's like 12 Regals.
What do you think? All right, are you ready for Holly's story?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. All right, that are a puzzle, right?
Kids outside of Rochester.
Yeah, so I was born in Rochester. In a town called Webster where life is worth living. That's our slogan.
Heaven on earth when you live in Perth.
So I pulled these out. We got, so for our last run Saratoga Summer, by the way, as well. I know we've all had a few whiskeys, but so Saratoga Summer is an annual release, and we wanted to celebrate the awesome season of summer in Saratoga where you can't get a reservation anywhere,
You get a
and
parking spot.
the people watching's
Best racing
great,
in the world.
and everything's really expensive. It's
Best
great.
racing in the world.
Yeah, best racing in the world. Go Saratoga. So,
I was convinced.
so the whiskey though, we did one last year. It was our first one, and we knew we wanted to work with Lost Lantern because we love all their blends. Why all you're all here. And so there was a few Kings County barrels, and we're huge Kings County bourbon fans. So we went up to visit Nora and Adam and picked our barrel, and it was a great success. We knew we loved the mash bill. It was great. Everyone loved it as far as we know. One person told us they didn't like it, but that's fine. And so we said, all right, Saratoga Summer II, so our 2025 release. We just could not find the time to go up to Vermont, which isn't really an excuse with how close you are, but we said, why don't we do it blind? So send us samples if you can of, I think we did 5 or 6 to start. It was round 1. Charles and I sat down, we got all of these Saratoga Summer 2.10, 2.9, we sat down together and we tasted them. There were some that, oh, I really like this nose. We don't talk about it until the end. Oh, I really like this nose. Oh, what'd you think of the palate of this one? We couldn't really decide and we said, would you mind if you could send us a second round of samples? So they didn't get mad at us, which is good because sometimes people get upset when you don't pick from the first round. And we got this next round and we still didn't know the distilleries. I think now you finally told us. There was some Frey Ranch, no, Still Austin was
Still
in there
Austin.
from Texas.
And St. Augustine from Florida.
St. Augustine from Florida, which was cool. And so Nora said, all right, I've got something for you that we've never worked with some of these distilleries that we might present to you, and some you'll know. So we tasted the next round, and there was one that just was a clear standout for both of our palates. And we kept going back to it, nosing, tasting it. We said, all right, but it was different. So we said, why don't we get a fresh palate? We'll taste it tomorrow morning. We tasted it the next day, still really liked it on a clean palate. So we wrote to them thinking, oh, we probably know this one. It's got a nice nougat caramel. It's very doughy. It's got a really nice kind of cinnamon bun sort of quality to it. And we knew it was bourbon. And they told us the distillery. And Charles and I both, we didn't have a heart attack, but we were like, oh crap.
Albany Distilling? What?
We stopped the recording just for that. Now it's back because you have a lot of Albany Distilling in the back. So we wrote back and it was Santan Distilling or Distillery or Spirits. And I was like, we looked at each other like, oh crap, like, have you heard of them? I had never heard of them. So we Googled them.
Had a non-heart attacks because you've never heard of them, right?
Well, so we Googled them and the first thing that came up was, and no offense to ready to drink cocktails in cans, but that was the first thing that came up. And I was like, oh gosh, what did we do? But we trust Nora and Adam. So we were like, hey, and we tried it again, 3rd time. We were like, this is a great whiskey. So we were like, all right, we're not going to tell anyone what it is. The reveal of the distillery will be tonight because we literally just got this release in today. So Adam and Nora were able to bottle it, pull this off. And this is the first time you're.
Out of the wire at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the first time you're working with them as well, right?
In fact,
and maybe once when you talk about the distillery. So we really do want your honest feedback. I have not tasted it since the sample. Charles is still nervous. We'll talk about the mash bill and everything, but
What's the
yeah.
proof? Yeah.
60.
It's up there, right?
60 point something.
61.4.
61.4. The funny thing is that we didn't send this to you until the 2nd round, but we actually always wanted to. And the reason we didn't send it until the 2nd round was we were literally waiting for the barrels to come in. We had just bought them. We were still waiting for them to come from Arizona, and they had gotten there. But when barrels arrive, it's a little traumatic for a barrel to be moved all the way from where this came from to Vermont. It takes a couple days to settle. But we always actually had a feeling that this was going to be the one. So
Because of the multi-bar.
because of the flavor profile.
So let's talk about this.
It is a single distillery release, which means that it is not one barrel. It's a blend of 3 different barrels, or portions of 3 different barrels. Did you say where they were? Where
No,
the distillery was?
So I didn't say anything about this.
So this is Saratoga Summer II, Santan Spirits, Arizona Straight Bourbon Whiskey. From a distillery in Chandler, Arizona, just outside of Phoenix, basically one of the big Phoenix side cities. And this is the first time we've worked with them. They're only available in Arizona. We visited them for the first time in 2018, so we've had our eyes on them for a while. And Santan Spirits is a distillery that is attached to the largest independent craft brewery in Arizona. There's one bigger brewery, but it's owned by Anheuser-Busch, so that doesn't count. But they're basically the big local Phoenix brewery for independent beer. And their founder, Anthony, who sadly passed about a year ago, had always been a huge single malt lover and wanted to see what it would be like to make single malt in the desert. They have an extensive single malt program focused on red wine cask aging, both Arizona red wine casks and California, but also started experimenting with bourbon. And we were shocked when we tasted this because we've worked with a number of Southwestern distilleries before. We've done a lot with Whiskey Del Bach, Arizona single malt, which after just a year down in Tucson is extremely dense and oaky and powerful. And this we found was exquisitely balanced even after 4 years in the Arizona heat in a non-climate controlled warehouse. Like it is still, we were there, we went back in March of this year, and it was pretty hot even then. I can't handle Arizona anytime after March. But this is a distillery that is doing everything the right way, and we think just is not known about yet. Even within Arizona, their focus has been on their beer program, and they're just quietly making, we think, really wonderful whiskey and waiting for someone to come along and be like, this whiskey's great. So we went there this year and we didn't know what to expect. We had never had their bourbon before. And we were just blown away and ended up buying quite a large number of barrels from them. And we'll be using it in multi-distillery blends in the future. But this is the first time we've ever done anything publicly with them. So we wanted to give you all something special.
It definitely Nashville.
It's on the label.
I was gonna read my taste, not to wish you out.
Let's see this.
Then I'm gonna have you come right back. I wanted to put my original tasting notes. So this is 55% corn, 13% rye, and 32% malted barley. So that definitely screams.
All right, can you repeat that one more time?
Sure,
Sorry.
it's 55% corn, 13% rye, and 32% malted barley. So that's their brewery. 80-20, 80 corn, 20 malted barley. And tasting notes, I mean, we tasted it multiple times, but original tasting notes were warm cinnamon toast crunch, nougat, some orange marmalade. I wrote tastes like 50 proof. The palate has some nice spice, Werther's sweetness, chocolate Werther's, Cracker Jack, and chocolate covered popcorn. Those were our, and then I wrote winner.
What were my tasting notes?
Charles's are soon coming. That's always Charles's tasting notes. Coming soon. If you check the website, it's always coming soon. Yeah.
Questions and perhaps like feedback for next year, if that's okay. Anybody else have a Saratoga Summer last? So I'm loving this. Last year's very hot in my mind.
Well, it was much higher proof.
Okay.
Kings County, yeah.
So I was going into this and I was like, shit, I gotta be ready.
It was
Last year's
mid-60s.
Really hot.
Yeah.
It's a 61 point.
Yeah, it was, but it was.
But this one for me drinks a lot less hot, which might be more dangerous.
Right.
When we get further into Saratoga Summer, can we just do a Saratoga Summer tasting? Because now I want to go home, like I want to buy a bottle of this and go home and taste last year's.
Yeah, I mean, eventually we will. Yeah. And you want us to just keep getting higher and.
We'll all be drinking.
Well, what you said last year's was higher.
That's
But they don't have.
Yeah.
We're not gonna go.
You're going the wrong way.
I have two.
Yeah.
All right, Adam, you can come back.
They don't have any.
But also, can you add one of those
That's
bottles
the
to
consumer.
my bottle?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mine's still on the show, no one's asked me to open
Oh, we both are.
I think what's special about this is
it.
if
I don't open mine, it's good.
it captures what we want to do as an independent bottler.
Really?
What these guys want to do.
I know.
I know, we've got plenty of it.
I tried watering them.
This
marriage? No, I'm.
Yeah.
You're
So
I tried it.
this is a distillery that genuinely is not well known for their bourbon at all, especially outside their home state. And I think that's what's cool about it.
Last year, but different.
No, we gotta show this.
Well, I am rotating.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a little weird.
Oh, look
Well,
at
you can
that.
pass it around, there's the sticker, so, and each year is a
Different than last
different,
year. Yeah.
jockey.
Silk.
Yeah, I was gonna say last
Rib
year's
or
was
bib?
different.
So,
Bib.
I was trying to help her, she was looking past her.
I knew I was gonna get in trouble. And you, can search for our logo in the clouds, so it'll be in a different spot each time.
Last year, I gotta try that.
I don't think it was in last year's,
Oh
that's
shit,
new.
I'll try that this year.
Yeah.
This is pretty hard
I
to
see
find.
it,
so
it's
I'm
not
gonna-
hard to find, just so you know.
Well, you should have not told me, I would have been looking all night
Error.
like, I don't see it.
I don't know, if you can't see it, there's
Finished
a might be
slash
there.
took on a business trip the last.
Oh, yeah, I
before
see
it spiked. Is there one of these that you'd recommend that would be closest to that?
So I missed the first part, say it again.
I accidentally took the last of our soy and spice on a business trip.
She's not a happy camper.
Oh.
And so I have to replace it. Is there something that,
Sounds like you're screwed.
You
Yeah.
did a very
I can-
bad thing, sir.
I have your email. I'll look up where there are one or two stores that still might have it.
All right,
You know,
so because the people online can't hear questions and all that kind of stuff, we're gonna wrap up with you guys online. Thank you, Adam. We're gonna stop the recording. Ask questions, but to painfully let these people go. Just thank you so much for coming again.
Before we bring the extra
Yeah, go ahead,
$4
go ahead.
The one last thing I wanted to say is that I'm so excited that you chose to
Like,
take
yeah,
this
you're
because
on.
to me, this is what an independent bottler is all about, is helping people discover distilleries that they don't know. Like, how many of you who are Scotch drinkers have bought something from an independent bottler from a distillery that you've never heard of and maybe can't pronounce? I certainly have, and then I've fallen in love with some of those places. And that's what we want to do for American whiskey. So I hope that this will be not only your first exposure to Santan spirits, but a distillery that you eventually seek out and see in other ways too. So thank you all for taking a leap of faith on this. And thank you all.
That's what
for-
blind tastings are all about, too,
Exactly,
you
yeah.
know what I mean? Right?
Oh, okay.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.